So hi, my name is Cujo. It's been a while since I've done a commentary, but this is kind of called to me. I've been playing a lot more like gameplays recently, but I had like an insight or a thought or whatever you want to call it to talk about the Upanishads, which is a Hindu Sanskrit text that came from ancient India. The Upanishads is essentially kind of like a Bible, I guess what you would say. It's a story of a boy that gives up his life to death, but in that giving up, he discovers a lot of like spiritual truths, I guess you would say. And I have some notes towards the beginning of the book that I have written down that I actually wrote down a couple months ago. It's been a couple months since I've actually read this book, but I remember feeling like a sense of well-being while I read it. I think it spoke to a deeper truth in me that even maybe I don't consciously realize. Some of the notable ideas that I'm going to talk about in this video are principles like samsara, Brahman, Atman, karma, dharma, and moksha, and mostly whatever I guess just comes to mind in between those. So there's 3 Upanishads in the book. There's the Isa, the Katha, and the Kena Upanishads. The Isa is a focus on everything being one, or like God or Brahma, which is another way to say God is in everything. So everything is one in the Isa. Katha is more of like an education or an intelligence Upanishad, and uses the story of the little boy that I talked about earlier. And the Kena is aligning with God, I guess, or using this information to actually align yourself with the Brahma or your Brahman self. If you're not into Indian ideas, this might be kind of confusing, but I feel pulled to talk about it, and maybe it will get you curious about it, or maybe some of these ideas will make sense. So yeah, the Isa Upanishad mainly focuses on learning that we are not separate entities, that we are drops from a cosmic consciousness locked into individuals. So the importance of acting for everybody to benefit is like your main priority, instead of like you benefiting over others or others benefiting over you. The well-being of everyone is of utmost importance because we're all in the same boat. We're all part of the same consciousness. So there's 2 main distinctions. Is if you're to separate yourself from the whole, is avidya, which is ignorance, and vidya, which is knowledge, is the opposite side of the same coin. So vidya is realizing that you are part of the greater good or a cosmic consciousness, and avidya is separating yourself, so ego identification. But the reason I say 2 sides of the same coin is we have an undying consciousness, whether we're ignorant or not. So the person that's watching this and the being that's making this video are the same consciousness experiencing itself. Is this idea, is the Isa puts us onto this. So then we quickly move on to the Katha Upanishad, which talks about the little boy Nachiketa. Nachiketa's father ends up, I think, accumulating bad karma and ends up having to give his son away to death, but he doesn't want to do it. He wants to essentially keep creating bad karma by like taking and not giving. I'm probably butchering this story. It's something like that. But Nachiketa actually says, you need to give me to Yama, which is death, in order to get rid of his bad karma, I guess, or to even out like the trajectory of his karma. But Nachiketa actually sees the transitory nature of life in the material, and so for this very reason is the reason why he is offering his life, is he feels compassion for his father and his cycle of karma, and offers his life as a sacrifice to death. In doing this, he demonstrates that he has no desire for worldly pleasures. The reason being is because worldly pleasures all cease to be. They decay. And so the only desire that Nachiketa ends up having is for the truth of being. He wants to understand what it means to be. So Yama goes to tell Nachiketa that in order to experience truth, you need to actually get glimpses of the Atman through experience and not through knowledge or words. So in making this and using this idea, I actually can't explain what the Atman or the Brahma is to you. It is something that you have to experience yourself through meditation or spiritual practices. Knowledge and words and language can point you in the direction of experiencing the Atman, which is the supreme self, which you could boil down to your soul. The way to achieve this is by overcoming desire and abstaining from worldly pleasures, which will allow us closer and closer to being able to glimpse the Atman. So to simplify this whole phrase is to just choose good acts over pleasure and abstain from the body and mind controlling you and reign control over body and mind. Once you realize the Atman, you actually realize that you as a being are immortal. Immortality comes from understanding consciousness, and when you understand the nature of consciousness, you begin to disidentify with form and thought identity that is created. So in all actuality, you are your experience. You're not the being that you conjure up in your head. I'm not Cujo. I'm the thing that is experiencing me speaking these words, and you are the thing that is hearing these words through the passage of time, consuming the words. But you're not the thought. You're not any of the stuff that makes you up. You're the thing that experiences these things. And in the Katha Upanishad, it claims that the soul is unchanging through lifetimes, and the one who sees this sees himself in that, which therefore leads to immortality. So you'll be reincarnated and come back into different forms of consciousness. And the ego will do everything in its power to scare you into thinking that you are not this. Spirit is what creates everything, the one consciousness. So if you're able to recognize that spirit or consciousness is the thing that creates everything in your life, you experience eternal bliss, because it's you that is actually creating your circumstances through your own perception. And I actually, when I wrote notes for the book, I must have been getting really into it or trying to fly through it to read my next book. I must have been really excited or something. But the Kena Upanishad basically talks about realizing your Brahma self or your God self, and to live in alignment with that God self, which is like a concept like Dharma, which I can get into, which is a way to navigate through life and reach enlightenment. But some spiritual India concepts that come from this book, I can just kind of go through a list and explain them. This book brings in samsara, which samsara is the cycle of life and death. The claim is that everything is samsara. Any kind of form or manifestation is samsara because it has ups and downs. Like emotions have ups and downs. Like literally anything manifest in your life that you can perceive is samsara. Nothing can exist without the cycle of life and death. There's rebirth and there is death in every part of existence. Brahman is that cosmic consciousness that I was talking about earlier, and Atman is the supreme self, which described in the book, Atman is a drop from the Brahman. So the way it would describe it is Brahman is like an ocean, and Atman is like a drop from the ocean. Yet when the drop falls from the ocean or is transmuted, it returns to the ocean. So with this argument that you're a piece of that cosmic intelligence or cosmic consciousness. Basically, the Atman is the soul, and Brahman is like God, or what I would consider to be God, I guess. Karma, to put it simply, is cause and effect. People like to say good karma and bad karma, but there's no assigning good or bad to karma. Karma is legitimately just cause and effect in India culture. If you do something, it's going to be both the cause and effect of something else. So like if I give you an ice cream, it's going to make you feel happy, but then you feeling happy is also a cause, which is going to end up being how you navigate differently through the day. And then that ends up being a cause for like maybe your wife is more satisfied with you or something. Just it's a butterfly effect of events that happens through karma. And a lot of spiritual texts actually tell you to abstain from karma. So to try to like do the least amount of possible, because doing good creates suffering and suffering creates good. Like it's a cycle that ends up having to perpetrate itself. For every like good action, there has to be bad out there, is the idea. And if you abstain from doing both good and bad, then you reach an enlightenment phase, which I don't necessarily agree with the idea 100%. I'll probably talk about it on the channel here soon, but there's a book called the Bhagavad Gita, which is kind of like a dual book to go with the Upanishads. It's another Hindu like story religious text, kind of like a Bible of sorts, which in that book it talks a bit more about how fully acting through karma but being aware actually leads to enlightenment, which I agree with more personally. But moving on to Dharma in relation to karma, from what I've heard, there's not a really good translation for Dharma other than your duty. And duty sounds like almost kind of forceful, like you have to, but Dharma is what the situation requires in the current moment that would be in alignment with your Atman. So maybe something like I want to make a video, or I want to play a video game, or something. I desire these things, but maybe my sister comes running in and wants to play with me. The situation in that current moment is actually calling for me to play with my sister. The reason for that being is circumstances are arising, and the karma that would be created from playing with my sister would be a lot better than maybe just passing my time on some like creative work or just consuming entertainment. My dharma in that moment would be to be of service to my sister, to bond with her. Or maybe dharma would be like doing the dishes or taking out the trash. Like the moment you notice something in the moment and the moment calls for you to do something. Doing dharma is taking out the trash or applying for scholarships or reading your mail. It's doing what the current moment in that point in time requires, is how I would put it. So that's why they use duty, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's specifically duty. It's just being present, noticing, and acting in alignment with what your soul sees. And the last one I have here is moksha, which is, to put it simply, enlightenment. And to put a real twist on you, moksha is realizing that something like nirvana and samsara are both the same. That both samsara, which is the cycle of life and death and suffering, and nirvana, which is enlightenment or moksha, is accessible in the present moment at all times. People like to see like enlightenment or heaven as something that we're trying to achieve when we die and make sure that this life gets us to the next thing. The next thing is never going to come. Like, it's just impossible to achieve. There's only this present moment. And if you're familiar with my commentaries, I always end up just talking about the present moment. But in realizing what this book is talking about, everything is connected. Moksha and samsara, enlightenment and suffering, are one and the same. You cannot have enlightenment without suffering, and you cannot have any of these ideas without their counterparts. And enlightenment, to me, is seeing this, that everything is what it is supposed to be in this present moment, in the current moment. If you aren't familiar with these ideas, they probably sound crazy. It's because I don't think words can capture something like this. It's a sensation or a feeling or an understanding through experience. If you're young and watching this, you're going to think I'm a silly little old guy. But if you've experienced what I'm talking about, good for you, man. I'm very happy for you as my fellow self. As the cosmic one that we are. But yeah, this is just kind of some of the ideas from the Upanishads. This is stuff that Nachiketa learns throughout the book, and towards the end of the book he is ready to die, but then fully accepts it and realizes the things that I talked about here. I can't do this book justice. It's a religious text. There's a lot of intricate detail in it, and making a simple YouTube commentary on it, I don't think will fully capture it. So you should definitely get the Upanishads if you're interested in a spiritual text. You don't need it to understand the ideas that are in it. You can find it through meditation or contemplation, with gurus or without gurus, and without the label. You could be a Christian and realize these same things. Man, it feels good to talk. I haven't actually made a commentary in a little bit, and I'm very glad that I sat down and did this. Hopefully somebody finds some value out of it, but thank you for taking the time to watch this. I'll probably talk about the Bhagavad Gita and maybe a couple other books that I've read in between me doing the commentaries, but I hope you enjoyed me kind of just giving you some Hindu ideas. I love you very much, and goodbye now.